All right, welcome back to SitInGrace podcast. If you don't know me, I'm the host, Jamie, and today I have a special guest, and it's Brianna. And the topic we're going to be talking about is going to be obedience.
Yeah.
Hello,
Hi.
welcome.
Well, for those that don't know me, I'm Brianna Coda. I used to be Jamie's young adults pastor for a brief moment.
Yeah,
And now my husband and I, we live out in Marietta. We are worship pastors at a church called the Refinery Church. And I'm so honored to be here today with you.
yeah. So it's a privilege being with you. So, yeah, we're going to get started with the podcast. So, we're going to be talking about obedience, and so I got some questions from
Shoot.
about obedience.
Yeah.
And the first one will be, what does it look like walking into obedience?
Mm. There are two really important questions when you're wanting to live a life of obedience with the Lord. And one is asking God, God, what do you want me to know?
Yeah.
What is it that you want me to know? Because I can't know everything. I can't see everything. I don't have the same perspective that you have. So, God, what do you want me to know? And Lord, what do you want me to do? Those two questions really kick off a journey of obedience, and not just asking them once,
Yeah.
but having those be questions that you ask daily, questions that you ask maybe even throughout your day.
Yeah. Just like everyday life, asking him where you want to go, or where do you want him to go, and the steps he wants you to take and all.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I had someone ask me the other day though, they're like, "Well, how do you hear God's voice though? Like how do you know he's telling you to do something or
Yeah.
he's giving you something to know or something to do?" And I explained it that, good or bad, we all know our parents' voice, right? We know
Yeah.
our dad's voice in a crowd. If my dad speaks and he's in the other room, like I catch it because my ear is attuned to his voice.
Yeah.
And so the more time we spend in intimacy and spending time with the Lord, talking to him and asking him these questions, the quicker we become familiar with what his voice sounds like, and we're able to discern it when we ask.
Yeah, definitely. That's like important. That time in the secret place is really important to get that intimate relationship with him.
Yeah.
So yeah. We're gonna go on into the next question. And the next questions are, what are some tips to overcome fear for what God called us to
Mm, okay. I have a few.
do?
Uh, One is to recognize a few things going in if you're going to live a life of obedience, things that you should already have in your mind that you know. One is that you're going to be really unpopular at times.
Yeah.
You will not always be liked. Your decisions will not always be appreciated. When you're following the Lord, you're going to risk unpopularity. Another one is loneliness.
Oh yeah.
When you follow the Lord, sometimes it's lonely because not everybody wants to do that. Or
Yeah.
maybe even the place that God's calling you or the season he's calling you into could just be you and him, and it could be very lonely.
Yeah.
So there's that one. And then also, you may not think about this when you say yes to obedience, but you may face opposition from people close to you
Yeah.
because people that love us that aren't even well meaning, they don't mean any harm, but they see things a certain way. They view us a certain way. They view our future a certain way.
Yeah.
They want certain things for us. And so we have to be able to put the Lord's voice in priority above that
Yeah.
and risk having even those closest to us sometimes not understand when when we say yes. My husband and I, we fostered a teenager when he was 15, and he came to us with he had dealt with some drug addiction, And people in our family, even those that loved us, were like, what are you thinking? What are you doing? Like, you're newly
Yeah.
married. We were only 2 years married. What's happening? And we just knew that that's what God had asked us to do. And so we were able to risk, the questions, and
Yeah.
maybe even some people going, I don't know what you're doing. Maybe even risking looking foolish
Yeah.
because we wanted to do what God had told us to do. And then another one is the in between of transition.
Oh yeah.
You're experiencing that in a big way
Yeah.
right now in your own life, huh?
Definitely.
How
Yeah.
has that been for you, the in between?
It's been interesting because like that book that I read, what was the
The
name of it?
Tension of Transition
Yes, The Tension of
by
Transition.
Craig Cooney. Great book.
Yes, you guys should read it if you guys going through like a change in life in general.
Yeah.
But pretty much like at first I was just like, I don't know, like it feels when you first taking the step of doing something new, you start feeling like, oh yes, this is awesome, right? But then after as time goes, you start feeling like, did I do the right thing? Sometimes you
Yeah.
start doubting stuff, but you already know like God, this is the area he wants you to go or the place that he wants you to go. And that's where like I say trust and faith comes in. Like no matter I don't know how I'm gonna get there, but I'm gonna get there because he has me going that direction. He'll provide the steps for me as I go. And
Yeah.
if I fail for some reason, he'll like redirect your direction. Like for me, an example is I'm soon gonna go to circuit riders for the CRX. It's the DTS, which I believe I'm like 2 months left before I get in. So I'm like preparing in general, like getting stuff I need. Also like that intimacy with God, before meeting new people. It does get lonely through the path sometimes. Like sometimes you're like, hold up, like I feel like I'm losing friends. People stop talking to me, or other people are going through new seasons of life too. So that's what I've been seeing around the change. But it's been like this season, it's been trusting God no matter what, like going to where towards like where I'm going.
That's
So
so
yeah.
good. You've experienced some of those things firsthand.
Yes.
Yeah. So those are things that you'll run into that you need to be prepared for, but you were talking
Hmm.
about tips to overcome them,
Yes.
to overcome fear. So to overcome those things that you're going to walk through, like loneliness, like
Hmm.
people not understanding, or the in between of transition, one is to not compare yourself to others.
For sure. Yeah.
Your journey is going to be so different than anyone else's. And I love that we are created by God. We're fearfully and wonderfully made.
Hmm.
So if we all look different and we're born with different talents and abilities and gifts that God's given us, and we're grown up in different cultures and backgrounds, like why would we think our stories would be the same?
Yeah.
We're completely different characters. So
Definitely.
what God is doing in us is going to be unique and it's going to be special. So comparison can definitely make fear take hold in us.
Yeah.
So we're like, oh, well, that person over there, they're getting there faster. They're doing something cooler. And that can distract us
Yeah.
from being obedient. Another one that I love, and I start my day with this, with gratitude, reminding yourself of what God has done in the past,
Yes.
even in the little things. You know, I wake up in the morning and I walk with the Lord. I go for a physical walk
Yeah.
and talk to the Lord. And, I'll just be like, Lord, thank you, for what you did yesterday. Thank you for, that I woke up in your presence. Thank you for my neighborhood that I get to walk through. And I find intentional things to reflect on that I can say thank you for,
Yeah.
before going to him and saying, "Hey, I have the stuff that I need help with today."
Yeah.
And when we really remember, I even encourage you to, and anyone watching, to keep a gratitude journal. Write down the big miracles that God does in your life,
Yeah.
because you're like, man, if God could do this, then oh my gosh, he could do this and this and this. Like nothing's beyond him. It
Yeah.
builds your confidence.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It is true. Like once you look back, reflect at the stuff he's done, you're just like, wow, it's crazy. But it's a reminder to kind of give us that reminder of like he's always with us, and also he can make it happen like previously. So yeah.
Yeah. And even familiarizing yourself with the stories in the Bible. It's like, well,
Yeah.
if God did that for them, he parts the Red Sea,
Oh yeah.
you know? If he can walk on water and raise Lazarus from the dead, then man, the things I'm asking for, like,
Are small.
they're small
Yeah.
compared to the power of God. Um, and speaking of God's word, and as we familiarize with those stories, another thing is to hide God's word in your heart.
Yeah.
For moments of fear, when I'm afraid, I remind myself, God, you have not given me a spirit of fear, but of power and love and a sound mind. And
Yes.
so that will keep the imperfect peace whose mind is stayed on thee. And when I'm able to really speak those scriptures over my life,
Hmm.
they're more powerful than anything I could say, like, oh, Brianna, don't be afraid, don't be scared. It's
Yeah.
like, man, the power of speaking God's words over me and my situation in my life. Have you experienced that a lot in your
Yeah.
life?
Because
Yeah.
there's been times that I was scared to do stuff, but I'm like, I trust you. I'm gonna go for it, and yeah, and that helped me through it for sure.
Do you have a favorite verse?
That's one of them for fear, the one that
Yeah.
you said. Another one is Jeremiah
Mm,
29:11, for he knows the plans, and he's there to like not harm you, and then he tells you like to prosper you and help you out. So I'm like, that's a reminder, even though I'm not sure where I'm going, he's there and he has a plan. Yeah. So yeah.
that's so good. So
Um,
good. And then the last thing I would say as a tip is, and this is something I don't even want to, I've talked to the Lord about this. You know, my husband and I have come out of a season of transition, much like you're experiencing now.
yeah.
And, you know, things have kind of settled a little bit. And I told the Lord, I was like, Lord, I don't want to lose my desperation for you.
Yeah.
Like, it's so key to in seasons of fear or where you're being obedient and you're in transition. And even once you get out, to maintain a desperation and a need to cling to the Lord. You know, we only tend to do that in seasons of crisis
Yeah.
and need. And then we get out and we're like, oh, everything's good now. We're like, thanks God, like peace, you know, peace out.
Yeah.
But you know, I ask the Lord, Lord, let me continue to live in a state of desperation where I just need you every moment of every day.
Yeah. That's awesome. It's like a reminder of like we need him no matter what. Good, bad, everything. The
Yeah.
ugly. Yeah. That's but yeah. Um the other question, adding on to like the fear one, would
Yeah.
be what if we don't feel qualified, is one of
Mm,
them, because a lot of people say that like I'm not qualified for this, there's
yeah.
other people better. It's an example I've
Yeah.
heard.
Um, God does not ask us to step out and do things we can do in our own ability.
Yeah.
Like we think, okay, God, like you're telling me to do this. Okay, I'm gonna go do this, and I'll come back and like we'll debrief. You know,
Yeah.
God and me'll debrief how that went, and God's like, that's not how this works. You know, you don't go and then we debrief.
Yeah.
Like when I'm asking you to do something, it's because there's absolutely no way you could do this by yourself,
Hmm.
and so it's that sense of partnership.
Yeah.
Going back to those first two questions, God, what do you want me to know? God, what do you want me to do?
Yeah.
But it's like, God, what do you want? And I'm going to need to cling to you and be desperate to know the play by play here.
Yeah.
It's not where I'm going to go run it and talk to you later. So I find that when there are God sized dreams or God sized things that God asks me to do,
Yeah.
I 9 out of 10 times, actually 10 out of 10 times, I know it's Him because there's absolutely no way I could do it
Yeah.
on my own. I don't have
Definitely.
the power or the ability or the resources, you know. And so those are the kind of things he asks.
Yeah. Definitely. Like for me, in my experience, I felt the same thing with like doing podcasts, fun fact, because I never imagined myself speaking. Like I'm that person that doesn't really like speaking. I'm more of like anything else, like maybe media or anything else that does not have to do with speaking. I'm like, yeah. But yeah, sometimes we got to step out into like out of our comfort zone because God wants us to do it. And He's like, I got a purpose for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And a quote that I've heard before is, um, God didn't call the qualified, but he qualifies the call.
Yeah.
So, and that stood out the time that I heard it. I was like, that stood out so much for me because like it is true. Like it's not that he calls a qualifier already. He calls someone that is like willing to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always like to think too, or remind myself, I should say, that God always funds his own projects too.
Hmm.
When we get into something that he asks us to do and we don't know if we'll have the resources, time, money,
Yeah.
people, whatever it might be, God's like, man, if I called you into it, I'm gonna fund it. He funds his own projects.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Definitely. But yeah, it's amazing because like even seeing throughout right now, like this year in general, like from January to now, I'm like a lot. I would have not imagined I'll be here, but without God, I would have not been here for sure.
And
So
you've
yeah,
you've stepped out in faith and you've taken the small steps and you've allowed him
yeah,
to do the rest, and it's beautiful.
yeah. It's so
Jamie, it's
beautiful,
beautiful.
the
Yeah, and you know what's
process.
cool about that is that sometimes we wonder, we're like, God, why do you do that? Why do you even look at the disciples and they were like a ragtag bunch of dudes,
Yeah,
they were not like the pick of the crop, yeah, tax collector in there, like,
yeah,
they were kind of a ragtag bunch of guys. But God does that so that only he can get the glory.
yeah,
If we're able to say it was us, then all the adoration and all the credit can't go to him.
yeah,
But when it's just him, then he gets all the glory. And then again, he knows if it's just him and we don't have the resources or maybe the gift set or whatever it might be, we might
yeah,
not feel like we're qualified.
yeah.
If we stay connected and we're abiding in him and we have that sense of desperation,
Hmm.
that keeps us reliant and it keeps us in relationship.
Yes. Yeah, it's so amazing how he works. Like I just, yeah, in awe in a sense. But yeah. Um, but another thing too, when I went to the conference, there was another saying that you never know the fruit of saying yes, but you
Mm.
never know the damage of a no. And that's like, I say that's pretty deep, but it is true. Like when you say yes and you're not sure where you're going, until you say yes, you never know what's gonna happen. But if you say no, you might lose like an opportunity of that he had for you. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree.
Yeah. Um, the next question would be, do you have an example like from the Bible, like where God uses someone and they were obedient and God gave them favor?
So, when Victor, my husband Victor, and I were in transition,
Yeah.
we had been on staff at a church for 8 years, and the Lord said, "It's time for you to go." And we said, "Where do we go?" And the Lord said, "I'm not going to tell you until you leave." And we're like, wow, that people are going to think we're really stupid.
Yeah.
We're leaving both of our jobs and our church family and our community. And we had gotten married there and we love everyone there. And so it was really hard.
Yeah.
And one of the verses and one of the Bible characters you're talking about that stood out to us was Abraham.
Abraham, yeah.
And if you go to Hebrews 11, I love this. It says, by faith, Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going.
Yeah.
So he had absolutely no idea. And God said, go. And he said, okay, I'm going to do it. It says, by faith, he made his home in the promised land like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him of the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. So he was already expectant
Yeah.
for what God had promised. And then it says, by faith, even Sarah, who was past childbearing age, was enabled to bear children because she considered him faithful who had made the promise. She trusted God and she couldn't have children.
Yeah.
And then he not only gave her a child, but check this out. And so from this one man, and he as good as dead, came descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as countless as the sand on the seashore. So he took the obedience of this one guy who didn't even know where he was going, but said, okay, Lord, I'm going to go the way that you tell me. And through that, he not only gave him a child, but he actually, out of that came a nation.
Yeah.
Just so amazing.
Amazing. Yeah. That's amazing. I think for me will be Joseph, because like how he was sold into slavery,
Yeah.
but God had a purpose for that, and he ended up being one of the higher officials later on. And sometimes we're like, I just like, why does these like hardships happen to me? But sometimes he's just preparing you for what you're gonna get
Yeah.
later. So
That's always a season of preparation, isn't
yeah.
it? And that's the hard part, you know? And sometimes too, it's God's preparing us for
Yeah.
where he's taking us. And sometimes he's getting the place ready and we just have to wait for what he's preparing for us.
Yeah.
That's hard sometimes.
Yeah, and it builds our character too. So
Yeah.
during that process. So, um, the next question will be like, how can I have faith when it feels impossible?
I mean, for me, I would even go back to the things we talked about in overcoming fear.
Yeah.
Like those same principles of not comparing myself, right? So I'm trusting in the God who's writing my story. So that gives me faith.
Yeah.
For the story he's writing in me, that he's gonna, he's gonna complete the work. He's gonna do it. Also reminding myself of the times God's been faithful.
Yeah.
Man, it builds my faith. For me, when we went through that recent transition, something that I really clung to was my faith journey in waiting to be married. I didn't meet my husband until I was 34. I didn't get married till I was 36.
Yeah.
And so there were years of waiting and praying and believing that if God had put the desire in my heart that he had someone for me.
Yeah.
And I waited for God's best in my life. And so that gave me patience and faith, and it helped kind of eradicate fear in this process by going, okay, Lord, like I've seen you be faithful in my life. I've seen you do what I thought in that season of my life was impossible.
Yeah.
I saw you answer my prayers, and I saw you not only do it, but do it in a way that was greater than I could ask, think, or imagine.
Yeah.
And then now this transition we've walked through now has given me incredible faith as the Lord has carried us and planted us exactly where he wanted us to be. And that is going to give us something to stand on and cling to for whatever God's assignment will be next.
Yeah. It's amazing. But it is true, like, for example, like for females that are single, it is hard to wait sometimes, but what you never know, like the preparation he's doing, neither through you or also like the male, will say an example, he might be preparing their life for when you get to meet them, it's time for you guys to be together. And that's how I feel like it.
Yeah. And when he brings you together, it's because he has a work
Yeah.
that's for you to do together
Mhm.
that you couldn't do on your own.
Yeah.
He's bringing you a partner, just like he did with, Adam. He got Eve, right?
Yeah.
She was a partner with him in the work. And so that's what our spouses are. They're partners. And I remember telling the Lord when I was single, like, Lord, I just bring me the person that you have for me, because I don't want to get married unless I can do more and be more for you
Mm-hmm.
with this person than I can by myself.
Yeah.
And so there were a lot of years of serving the Lord single, and the Lord was able to guide me and lead me and use me, and it was awesome. Like, I don't look back at those years and go, oh, those were lonely years. I look back at those years and go, wow, God, we accomplished a lot together, until God said it was time, like, hey, okay, well, you've got more to do and you're going to need somebody to help you do it,
Yeah.
so here you go, you know.
Yeah. It is true. Um, do you have any experience you want to share about obedience?
mm. I will say this: when I was 17 years old in high school, I had just come back from a missions trip, and
Nice.
I was feeling like super charged. You know how you come back and you're like,
Yeah.
yes, you know? And I remember laying in bed and telling the Lord, Lord, I just want you to take my life and do whatever you want with it. Like, I just want, just have your way, like,
Mhm.
whatever you want. And my senior year of high school, I ended up walking through some really difficult health things and things that were unexpected for me. And in my life, I've gone through seasons of unexpected, you know, maybe like you were talking about earlier, like pain or trial or whatever it might be.
Mhm.
Um, but now, all these years later, uh, more than 20 years later, I never regret giving him my life and telling him I'd do what he said. And I've never regretted being obedient. When um when I was single, and all those years where, you know, you have friends that are running around and, you know, sleeping around and doing
Yeah.
things, and I was like, Lord, I'm just going to do things your way. I never regret that. Being married now, it was a gift that I did things his way. You know, us taking our foster son was hard and a really difficult journey, but I look at what God did in his life, and the way that he was able to use us in that season, and I don't regret it.
Yeah.
You know, I look back at the transition we've just walked through, and not all of it was fun or comfortable,
Yeah.
but I don't ever regret telling the Lord, Lord, you can just have my life and you can do what you want. The blessing that comes with that, the ability to put your head on the pillow at night
Yeah.
and know that you're living your life to please him, and living in the realization of what he has done for me. That, you know, there's a saying, or a quote, that says, may the lamb receive the reward of his suffering. It's like, I want to be the reward.
Yeah.
Lord, here's my life. You suffered and died, so the least that I can do is give you all that I have.
Yeah.
And I've honestly never regretted it. The only time I've ever regretted something is when God said, hey, go do this, and I was hesitant,
Mhm.
or I dragged my feet.
Yeah.
Or I was like, no, not yet, Lord. Or what we talked about, I'm not ready, I'm not
Ready. Yep.
equipped, I don't know what I'm doing. Those moments where I've second guessed or delayed obedience, you know, because delayed obedience
Yeah.
is still disobedience.
It's just like delayed though, in a sense, but it is still
Yeah,
disobedience,
it's
like you
still
said.
telling Lord, not now, you
Yeah.
know, and the Lord's like, nope, now. And so, yeah, the only time I've ever had regrets is when I didn't immediately respond to the voice of the Lord.
Yeah.
But he's so gracious. And I love that if you're leaning into the Lord and you're
Mhm.
doing what he says, you're not going to mess it up. Like you were talking about, right? If
Yeah.
he course corrects, right? So
Yeah.
it's like, if if I make a mistake, or even if someone else makes a mistake and it impacts me,
Yeah.
other people's decisions and their disobedience, it does not thwart or rob me of what God wants to do and what he's going to do in and through my life if my life is surrendered.
Yeah. Pretty much, yeah. That part that you said, like having pretty much a life of surrender, like laying down your life for what he done. Cause you remember like that's how I feel too. Like when it comes to surrendering my life lately, I've been learning how to like just surrender everything, be like, I trust you, and whatever happens is for your glory, and you're gonna take me where you want me. And yeah, it's like it's a hard thing. Surrender is a really hard
Yeah.
thing, but it's worth it in the end, like you say, for sure. Yeah. So this is the end of the podcast of obedience, and it was nice having you
Thank you
today.
for having me, Jamie.
And yeah, we'll see you next time in the next podcast. All right, bye.